The sound of the heart monitor was the only proof she was still alive. The steady beep, 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 echoed through the sterile white walls of room 317, a rhythm that had become the background music of Dr. Nathan Hale's life for almost 6 years. Every morning before sunrise, he would walk through the quiet halls of St. Jude's Medical Center, coffee in one hand and her file in the other, as if she were his only patient in the world. Her name was Amelia Voss, once the youngest self-made millionaire in New York, a tech visionary who built an empire before turning 30. Then, one rainy night, her car spun off the highway and everything went dark. They said she wouldn't make it. They said her brain was gone. But Nathan didn't believe that. Not once. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in miracles that come when hope refuses to die, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because what happened next will remind you that love can bloom even in the quietest places. For 6 years, Amelia's room became Nathan's sanctuary, a place where science met faith. He talked to her about everything. The patients he lost, the ones he saved, the days when he doubted himself. He told her about his mother's illness, about the long nights he spent studying in dim hospital cafeterias, about how sometimes he felt invisible in a world that only noticed the powerful. And even though she never answered, Nathan swore he saw her fingers twitch when he played her favorite classical records, and her lips move ever so slightly when he read her company's old press articles aloud. The hospital staff whispered that Nathan had fallen in love with a ghost, that he was wasting his youth and talent on a lost cause. But Nathan didn't care. There was something about Amelia, even in her stillness, that spoke of strength, of life refusing to let go. Every day, he adjusted her sheets with the gentleness of someone touching hope itself. Every night, before leaving, he whispered the same promise: "I'll be here when you wake up." Then, one ordinary morning that began like any other, the extraordinary happened. Nathan was reviewing her latest brain scans when he noticed faint neural activity in regions that had been silent for years. His heart pounded as he ran the tests again. It wasn't a glitch. Amelia's brain was stirring. Minutes later, as sunlight filtered through the curtains and bathed her pale face, her eyelids fluttered. The nurses froze. The air grew thick with disbelief. And then, she opened her eyes. It was like watching the world restart. Her blue eyes blinked against the light, unfocused at first, then filled with confusion and fragile wonder. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice trembling. She looked at him, her lips parting slightly as if searching for sound that had forgotten how to exist. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. One word, broken and beautiful: "Where am I?" The room erupted. Nurses rushed in. Doctors gasped. Machines beeped faster. But Nathan barely heard any of it. All he saw was her. Awake. Alive. Fragile like glass and yet burning with quiet strength. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then instinct took over, and he helped her sit up, his hand trembling against her back. The world seemed to blur except for her face. Years of exhaustion melted into tears he hadn't realized he'd been holding back. Recovery wasn't easy. Her body was frail, her muscles weak from years of stillness. She had to relearn how to walk, how to hold a spoon, how to speak full sentences without her voice cracking. But Nathan never left her side. He guided her through every painful stretch, every trembling step, every frustrated tear. He celebrated every small victory: a finger lifted, a smile attempted, a step taken. Amelia was a fighter. Once her mind began clearing, she started asking questions. What had happened to her company? Her family? Her life? The answers weren't kind. Her empire had been taken over by investors who declared her legally incompetent. Her parents had passed away, and her name had faded into the whispers of "that girl who never woke up." When she first heard it all, she sat in silence for hours, staring out the hospital window at the setting sun. "So," she finally said softly, "the world moved on without me." Nathan, standing beside her, replied gently, but now it's your turn to move it again. It was during those long nights of rehabilitation that something began to shift between them. At first, it was just gratitude, the way Amelia's eyes softened whenever Nathan entered the room, the way his voice steadied her fears. But soon it grew into something deeper, something that neither dared name. Nathan tried to suppress it. He was her doctor, after all. But love, like healing, doesn't follow rules. It just happens, quietly and inevitably. One night, Amelia had a nightmare, reliving the crash that stole her life. She woke up trembling, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. Nathan rushed to her side, holding her shaking hands until her panic subsided. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're here." In the dim light, their eyes met, hers filled with tears, his with something unspoken. "You never left me," she said. "You kept your promise." And in that fragile silence, something inside both of them broke and mended at the same time. Days turned into weeks, and Amelia grew stronger. The hospital soon became too small for her will to live again. She began attending therapy outside, rebuilding not just her body but her legacy. The media found out eventually. Amelia Voss wakes after 6 years in coma, and suddenly she was the miracle headline the world couldn't stop talking about. Cameras followed her, magazines called her the Sleeping Beauty of Wall Street, and offers poured in. But Amelia had changed. She no longer cared about the empire she once ruled. All she wanted was to start over, quietly, honestly, freely. Yet fame has its price. Nathan found himself pushed aside by hospital administrators who feared unethical proximity. They transferred him to another wing, citing professional boundaries. Amelia protested, but he refused to let her fight for him. "You need to heal," he said gently. "You owe yourself that." She looked at him with eyes that carried too much meaning to fit into words. "And what if I owe you, too?" she whispered. He smiled sadly. "Then repay me by living." For weeks afterward, she didn't see him. Her room felt emptier than ever, even as her strength returned. She spent her days relearning joy, visiting the hospital gardens, feeling sunlight on her skin, talking with patients who found hope in her story. But every night, she found herself staring at the door, half expecting him to walk in with his familiar stethoscope and tired smile. Then one rainy evening, months after her discharge, Amelia returned to the hospital, not as a patient, but as a donor. She had decided to fund a new neuroscience wing for coma recovery patients, naming it the Hale Center for Hope. When she walked into the dedication ceremony, cameras flashing, she spotted him across the room, standing quietly, away from the crowd, his white coat slightly wrinkled, his eyes filled with disbelief. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other as if the noise around them had disappeared. After the ceremony, she found him alone in the corridor where her story began, room 317. The bed was empty now, but the air still carried memories. "I didn't think you'd come," he said softly. Amelia smiled. "I had to. I left something unfinished here." She stepped closer, her heart trembling. "You once told me to live." "I did. But now I know. I can't do it without you." Nathan's breath hitched. Years of restraint crumbled under the weight of that single sentence. And in that quiet hallway, where hope had once seemed impossible, he finally let himself feel what he had buried for so long. He cupped her face gently, as if afraid she might vanish again. "You were never just my patient," he whispered. "You were my reason." They stood there, the doctor and the woman who had slept through 6 years of her life, holding on to each other like two souls who had fought through darkness and finally found home. Outside, the rain softened into silence, and for the first time in a long time, Amelia felt completely alive. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, because sometimes, love is the miracle that medicine can't explain. Speech balloon comment below. What would you do if you woke up years later and found that someone never gave up on you? Amelia and Nathan's story wasn't about a doctor saving a patient. It was about two broken lives healing each other. One had lost her future, the other had lost his purpose. But when they met, life gave them both back, and that, perhaps, was the greatest miracle of all. The end.